Hello, and welcome back to Shelf Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of female founders bringing their product-based businesses to retail shelves. I'm your host, Roberta, and today we are sitting down with Sarela Herrada, co-founder and CEO of SIMPLi, a leading regenerative organic staples brand that's really redefining what it means to cook simple, eat well, and most importantly, feel good. I'm so excited to talk to Sarela today. Welcome to Shelf Talks.
Thank you so much for having me, Roberta.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. And I am definitely interested in hearing your story. But let's first start going back before even thinking about starting a brand. What was life like for you?
Yeah, I grew up in Peru. I moved to the US when I was 14 years old, and I have focused my whole career on building supply chains and specifically in food. Since I graduated from undergrad, I've been in the supply chain food industry for about 15 years now. And yeah, I moved to the US like millions of immigrants do to pursue the American dream with my mom. I saw a food system that prioritizes foods with chemicals and coloring and processing and very, very different to the food systems that I grew up in Peru. I was very privileged to grow up in a country with incredible ecosystems and rich food and culture, but we also deserve to have that here in the US, and we deserve to have foods that nourish you and your loved ones. So now I have made that my life purpose to be able to bring incredible nutrient dense single origin ingredients to the market through SIMPLi.
And what made you decide to kind of veer off into creating something on your own?
Yeah, I think that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur at heart, and I didn't know what my calling was until me and now my husband, but at that time it was my boyfriend. We went hiking down in South America. We were together for 6 months at that time, and I had to bring him home, and I had for him to meet my family. And it was during that trip that we saw firsthand we were camping right between the border of Peru and Bolivia in Lake Titicaca, these beautiful farms of quinoa. And at that time, quinoa was in the market for like 20, if not 25 years. And there was no deep impact and development into those communities. It was very rural and still live at under poverty line level. So we felt that there was something disconnected there. And there was definitely a big gap into building supply chains at large for products that could be impactful for the communities, socially, environmentally, and tell the story to the consumers. So that's kind of where SIMPLi came from.
So I love like going home and kind of understanding and seeing how you could impact the states. And it's one thing to have that thought, but another thing to bring it to fruition and actually do it and bring it to the states. So what did that look like? What were first steps?
Yeah. At that time, we took our life savings and we put that on inventory and we built two supply chains. We built one from Peru for quinoa. And the whole idea was to really understand what made good food unique and why was Peruvian quinoa from the Andes really important to tell, and why was it a growing product, and why did it matter for the people, the consumers. And the more we dove in, it really is all based on agriculture. Good food that nourishes you and nourishes the planet is based on how it's grown. So quinoa has been grown in the Andes for thousands of years, and these communities have been doing it down from generation to generation. Not only the farmers know how to do it well, but the soil and the environments do, right? That seed is an heirloom seed that has been developed throughout generations in order to last and fight pests and grow from a nutrient dense perspective. And that's when SIMPLi became a huge advocate and now the leader of the regenerative organic movement with 33 SKUs nationwide that are regenerative organic certified. But at that time, it was just based on what makes good food grow, and that is ancestral indigenous agriculture, which is the base and the pillar of regenerative organic agriculture. So we did that with quinoa, and then we're like, okay, well, what is one of the most fraudulent food items in the world? One is honey, and second is extra virgin olive oil. And we're like, okay, well, where's extra virgin olive oil grown? And it grows in the Mediterranean, one of the oldest civilizations. In Greece, we developed the second supply chain out in Sparta, Greece, to really be able to understand what makes single origin, authentic, rich, high polyphenols, extra virgin olive oil special.
And just for clarity, when you say regenerative, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, that's a great question, Roberta. Regenerative organic is built on organic certification. Not only looks at what do you harvest, so what is the food that you're taking out of that crop, and making sure that no chemicals, no fertilizers, no pesticides, but also looks at what do you leave behind. And what do you leave behind is the soil. We believe that you got to find the soil better than you found it and make sure that you're not degrading but regenerating. And if you have really rich soil with rotational crops and every single crop brings a different profile of minerals and nutrients to the soil, that food that grows on that rich dark soil is also going to be more nutrient dense. And we have done studies that connects how regenerative organic agriculture is deeply connected to higher nutrient density of our food. For example, our red quinoa has 160% more iron than the USDA benchmark of conventional quinoa
Wow.
because of the way that it's grown. So it's just fascinating to see how good food that grows on rich soils is going to be better for you and is going
Yeah.
to have that profile and not empty calories that don't feed you but also nourish you.
Yeah. So once you were able to do that supply chain for quinoa as well as for olive oil and bring it to the States, was your first thought about you selling it direct, or was it more about you being more the manufacturer bringing it into the country and then selling it to a brand?
Yeah, we took a very unique path to market that is quite unconventional for a CPG company, but we launched in food service. So we started to sell in restaurant groups. And we did that for the first 2 years of business. We started in 2020. And the reason why we did that was because we needed economies of scale. So we D2C and we also didn't have much money to be able to acquire customers and have the cost acquisition that sometimes is needed in D2C. And retail can also be expensive to get into that first year through shelf space. So we're like, okay, well, we need economies of scale, we need volume to make all our fixed costs really work for us. And food service, even though structurally is lower margins, it allows us to go to market and being able to commit to our farmers long term, have the economies of scale that we needed, have container loads right off the bat, and being able to go to market. We launched with Sweet Green. Sweet Green was one of our first customers. Little Beat up in New York, and a vegan or plant-based burger joined up in Boston called Be Good as well.
I love that strategy, and it's different in regards to what I love about it is the fact that a lot of people think, let me go to retail stores, but thinking about how to build that volume, not having the money at the initial point to market from a retail strategy standpoint, but finding another outlet that you could really drive volume and start to kind of build your brand and get the cash to eventually go to retail, I think is a smart move. What does that look like when you're trying to get in those food services?
Yeah, well, my background is in food service. I come from Cava. I was the third employee
Ah,
there, and
oh,
I was there.
really?
Yes,
Oh, wow.
I was there for 5 years. So I knew the industry, but that's not how we got in. I actually LinkedIn messaged a lot of the founders and procurement teams, supply chain teams, and there was a need. There's still a need for better products with high volume supply chains that can last and a story to be told, and most importantly, just a great product. Even today at the office, we did a cutting of our quinoa versus a competitor in the market. Our quinoa was just fluffier. There was no bitterness. The color was different. It wasn't mushy. Just good products that speak to it. And in that first year, we did a lot of chefs will do a lot, and they still do. They do a lot of blind cuts where they will uh, try our product against other brands without really knowing the brand. And I can remember the last time that we've done a blind cut and we didn't win.
Wow.
So our products need to speak for itself, and culinary sees that value.
Let me ask you a question because I'm sure in order to have like better quality product, the cost is going to be more. How were you able to communicate the value of your quinoa versus maybe, a secondary brand that was a little bit cheaper?
Yeah, specifically in food service where margin is, I mean, in retail as well, right? It's is very important and delicate. That's why we had to go into economies of scale, and that's why we needed to move volume in order to do so. And the way that we have built to this day our supply chains is that we try to consolidate the middleman as much as we can in order to gain margin to be able to pay a premium to our farmers and then also be placed in the market in a competitive price point, even though we're a premium, we're still accessible. And that's really important as you're building your international supply chain. So on average, there's 6 parties that sit between the farmer and the customer, and we try to consolidate as much as we can because every single partner wants a little bite. So we go directly to the farmer. We have an agronomist team now. At that time, it was just me and my husband with a truck and making sure that we were putting 44,000 pounds on that truck in order to meet our minimums for co-packers volumes and such. So we work with the farmers directly, and then we have a network of co-packers. We're the exporter of record, we're the importer of record. We drive around distribution and we work directly with the distributors to get that product into shelf. So that allows us to really be able to consolidate margins and being able to be competitive. Now, in the first early years, now there's data points and we can really get feedback from the market, and specifically on retail with shelf, which the first year or two of retail launch, we didn't have access to data. We didn't have access to spins or Nielsen and see how performance that is. And that is an advice I would have for founders. If you can afford it, do it, because you get so much smarter about your performance and you become obsessed on how your product is performing against your competitors and your category set completely. And it just gets you much understanding of what that is. But at that time, we didn't have that visibility. So it was just going to shelves, understanding how our customers are being priced. What are they doing for promo? How often are they discounting? Does it make sense to discount that frequent, that deep? What is the category leader doing based on the space that they would have on the shelf? That is who the category leader was, or who we thought it was, that it was doing a really good job on our category, and how we were doing differently.
Yeah. So just to back up a moment, so you were in food services. What made you decide to go to retail?
Well, we launched in January 2020, and we had our inventory in the US and ready to go by March 2020 in food service. So we realized I think at that time there were maybe like 200 locations across 3 different concepts that were going to go live, and COVID hit and all the locations closed. So then we
Oh,
had
wow.
all this inventory, more on the water that it was coming in and nowhere to go. So then we were like, "Oh, well, we knew that we weren't gonna grow into retail eventually, but not that quick." So we launched into meal kits first. So that's when, Daily Harvest and Blue Apron, Splendid Spoon were really taking off, and meal kits were a fast growing segment. So we pivot that inventory into that, and that really helped us move some of that bulky inventory quickly. And then at the beginning of the first year of 2020, we're like, "Whoa, what about retail?" Kind of our products live in retail, and we knew nothing about retail. And we just had a good product, and we've certainly become much, much more smarter about how do we go about retail. But at that time, we launched Quinoa, which is the product category was declining, and a kind of like a lunch bag. It's just your regular brown bag, and we just sew it on top. And at the bottom of it, they would just leak, and quinoa will come out. So the packaging just was just not ready for retail at all. It was, we would just go around stores at Whole Foods and checking the bags, making sure that they weren't damaged, until we got into the second phase of our packaging, that it was more resilient, and that's what we have on the shelves now. But we were able to pivot into retail based on the commitments that we had to the farmers. We had all this volume, and food service, it was an unknown in 2020. And
Hmm.
then 2021 started, restaurants were starting to open up. We got picked up by Whole Foods, and the meal kits were also picking up some of the products. So in a way, it accelerated our growth into different revenue channels, but it was just based on the commitments that we had to our farmers.
And how did you get discovered by Whole Foods?
Yeah. Well, I pitched anyone that would have that would have some time to listen about SIMPLi, and I pretty much reached out to, I think, like 5 different people on LinkedIn. There was my friend from college used to work with someone that worked at Whole Foods that time, and then through a local nonprofit in DC, because we were in DC at that time, they were matching emerging small companies to the category buyer at Whole Foods. So I did a pitch that way as well, made it on the website, submitted through a distributor, Rainforest at that
Or
time,
however you could
and
get in,
eventually,
all the channels.
whichever way. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And, every founder knows that those early years, about the hustle, and it's about, and it still is, it's about getting into those conversations, because if you have a really good product that is aligned to the mission of the retailer that you are trying to reach, and you know the customer is going to resonate to your product, then it's just about having the conversation and that alignment during that conversation.
Yeah. And what do you feel that you had in your pitch that really allowed for the buyer to really understand and kind of lean into the brand?
I would say at that time, it was packaging. It was a packaging differentiation point. Now it's more about the product attributes, the regenerative organic certification, and the nutrient density of our food, the brand and lifestyle that Simply is. But at that time, on that first wave to get into distribution, it really was about packaging. Is an aisle that has been dominated by plastic, and we were launching our grains and beans on a craft bag, although it was leaking, but we got fixed after. It was on a beautiful non-plastic bag with an iconic sewing on top that you just didn't see on that category. So it was true innovation, and it was the first quinoa. We've launched first quinoas, first beans, and now first extra virgin olive oils, all regenerative organic certified. So that certification was really new. There wasn't much penetration at that time, but for us, it was really important because it told the story of ancestral indigenous agriculture that our farmers were doing. And we wanted to tell that story of why it was different. Now we have nutrient density studies, and now we see the attributes, but we knew at that time that indigenous agriculture just provides a better product, healthier and tastier than what is on the shelf.
Yeah. So is that innovation really, because you mentioned that this was a category that was downtrending in the marketplace. Was that really what allowed them to say, yeah, let me still bring you in and try, although the category is declining? Typically, you're not looking for innovation. You're not looking for new products to really, be a part of that set and looking at scaling back.
Yeah. I remember when we launched, there was another quinoa brand that launched with us. And I was like, man, there's two new brands that are going head to head against each other in a way, on a category that it wasn't growing. And, so obviously Simply, we've continued to grow and have a lot of success and grow into other categories. But the buyer was probably looking for innovation, and it was looking at, how do I turn this around? And quinoa has had a moment, and now is mainstream, but not at that time. Now it's growing.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that, and it's having a moment again. And it's so exciting for Simply to be part of that conversation, specifically as a Peruvian, for such an incredible crop and incredible gluten-free grain that we can offer consumers. But at that time, it was very different on how the economics of that category were moving. And then we realized that in order to grow the best quinoa in the market, we needed to grow the rotational crops of what ancestral agriculture is you grow quinoa, then you rotate it the next year with beans, and then the third year you rotate it with potatoes, and then you let the land rest for a year. And a lot of the farmers stopped doing that ancestral knowledge because quinoa was the cash crop, and the profile of it was changing. And specifically, now we know that the nutrient density of it was also changing. So then what we realized was like, well, we need to promote those rotational crops and provide that as a cash crop so they can reinstitute these practices back. And that's when we launched beans, because we had beans that were available. And now Simply is the number one bean brand in Whole Foods nationwide on the dry side. And it came from understanding what grows a good quinoa and how all rotational crops are linked together.
Yeah. So that is how kind of your that quinoa would then change kind of how it tastes, how it's grown, is just not having those stages in place that typically in the past. That's interesting. And it can
Absolutely.
change the entire makeup of the product.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. I mean, it's like us, right? Like humans, if we were just to eat protein, we probably wouldn't be healthy humans, right?
Yeah.
The soil is the same way.
So interesting.
The microorganisms, you gotta give it some minerals, you gotta give it nitrogen, you gotta give it phosphorus, you gotta be able to sequester carbon. It's the same way. It's like the living human millions of microorganisms live in healthy soil, and we gotta be able to keep those microorganisms to grow nutrient dense food.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you were on shelf, you said you started to see that the quinoa was kind of coming through the bag. Was that off of customer feedback? Was that you just going to the store and actually seeing it yourself? How did you even know that you were having those challenges?
Gosh, I mean, we would do demos ourselves and we would see it. And every time we would go into a store, any of those leakage, we just buy that product out because we didn't want to have returns
Returns,
from
yeah.
Whole Foods, right? And then in the meantime, we're just scrambling onto like, how do we fix this packaging problem, but it still be true to ourselves with a compostable bag? So yeah, so I just remember the corners. And then what we ended up doing as an immediate solution, our genius idea was rather than using one bag, let's double bag it. So we would put one bag and then we would push another bag inside. So we would put two bags for each product. So that way, if there was leakage on the internal bag, at least the outer bag. So yeah, there were a lot of long days picking those bags from the shelves.
Yeah, yeah. Was there any other early feedback that you got, whether it was from the buyers or customers once you launched in store?
I think when we launched in store with at that time our quinoa, it was incredible to get feedback onto how different the taste was than other quinoas out there. I found that fascinating. We would do demos and people would say, "Oh, I don't eat quinoa; it's just really bitter, and I just really don't like it." And we're like, "Well, try ours," and we're like, "Wow, this is just so fluffy. There's no bitterness," and that was fascinating to me. How people can be stirred away from a product just because they've had one bad experience of
Mhm.
not being the grown way. And we hear that also in extra virgin olive oil and how the American palate is more used for a rancid extra virgin olive oil than a clean one. So I thought that was really fascinating. And then also people are just looking for healthier items. Selling that is a gluten-free alternative to rice was, just the selling point rather than saying why this quinoa is better than others, rather than like why quinoa is better as a whole. And I think that sometimes you get so focused on so granular against your competition on your specific niche, on your specific category, versus just take one step back and how does that consumer see your product against another purchasing option that they would have
Mhm.
versus your immediate competitor right next to you on shelf. And that's something that now we have learned now on the nutrient density side of rather than people comparing simply against a regular conventional bag of beans that are way much lower pricing but also filled with pesticides. They look at it from how much protein there is on this bag and the cost of the protein per ounce versus a bag of chicken. And it's going to be cheaper, but it's going to have the same nutrient density.
That's a really good point. Like your competition, it's not always the products that surround you right there on the shelf. It could be other products around the store that you can be
Yeah.
compared to and are better than.
Absolutely. And that's something also that retailers really love to hear because you're bringing traffic to a category. You are growing the category.
Yeah.
And something I've also learned is you want innovation in your category. If there's another brand that is also doing something really exciting on your category, welcome it in a way, get close to that brand because you together are going to drive category growth. And sure, there can be some competition, but at the end, there's enough market share and there's enough category purchasing power from consumers for both brands or all innovation really to grow rather than looking at it like going from head to head.
Yeah, yeah. So you did sampling in stores and as well as telling consumers kind of the difference and getting them knowledgeable on your product and how it's different. Were there other ways in which you drove awareness of the brand and actually drove consumers to shelf?
We did demos. I mean, the big one was the certification in front of pack and being regenerative organic certified was a big differentiation for us. The shelf talkers, we would, wherever we could and have store by store, have relationships with the store managers, and we were allowed or they would grant us anything for free, a tag that would say organic that would help on the merchandising side. If we really knew the store and they had some space on a off shelf or another placement in the stores, we would absolutely take it and really try to develop that relationship and push it. I mean, you have to be scrappy. There's no dollars. You can't pay for those big fees. And sometimes one store here, one store there really helps you with the velocities to make a difference.
Yeah. So building those relationships with people in the store to help you kind of be
Yes,
able
they're
to be
the biggest
placed.
advocates and developing those relationships is really important.
Yeah. Was there anything that you had no idea would be part of that relationship with a retailer until your product was actually in store? Anything surprising to you?
I don't think so. I think that the way that we think about retailers is that if you're able to understand their goals and their customer base, and if you share those same goals and customer base, then it's game over. You're really going to be able to understand how your product can move. They want you, if they're putting you on shelf, it's because they want you to succeed. So just being able to really take that opportunity and focus on velocities. That is probably the one thing that it took us probably a year, or if not more, to just really focus on how are we performing, and let's perform that really, really well with that small square footage space that we got on the shelf, and maximize it and really think about, is this the right product? Is this the right SKU? And just try to optimize your catalog before you expand, even outside of some of the key retailers, and definitely before outside of natural.
Yeah. And then how did you make sure that just from a manufacturing standpoint, you were able to supply with the replenishment orders when it came to retail?
Yeah, so we had this whole business on food service that after COVID it picked up, and it picked up big. We were our supply chains, our infrastructures really was built for volume and built for being able to replenish that. But they say that usually every time that you hit like by three, everything breaks, and we've definitely had that moment. And I believe it was at the end of 2024, beginning of 2025, where our supply chains, our inventory planning definitely didn't meet the needs of the business for the growth that we were expecting. So we had to slow down in order to grow faster. And we really had to build those building blocks and be very disciplined about forecasting bottoms up, really understanding. We actually just launched this on retail as well, which is even more detailed. Is every single retailer, every single SKU, every single week, what is the velocity that we expect for all 5,000 stores that we have nationwide, so we can really understand our performance on shelf. And I wish I did that earlier. I wish that I knew to be able to be so granular about performance. So that way it really empowers the whole organization to be tighter about inventory management and replenishment and sales and trade planning.
I would imagine it's difficult when you are starting to build to have to slow down in order to your point, like speed up. What would you tell other founders that were kind of at that place where they know they need to slow down, however, are scared to lose the momentum?
Yeah, and I was there. I was absolutely there. It's hard. It's really hard because you don't want to lose the opportunity. And, you can hear advice and read all the books and all the things, but when you're in it and you can see things that are already breaking, you don't have that runway built in order to land the plane. It's really hard to slow down, and is absolutely necessary to have that structure if you want to grow faster and if you want to hit certain milestones of growth. If you want to expand from a handful of retailers into natural, into specialty grocery, into mass, you have to have fundamentals built, and you have to have a great team that is going to support that. And it comes down to the incredible team that is behind you and the organization to be able to support that growth.
Yeah.
Just hire smart, hire great team members. I live this. Take your time to hire the right people that is going to be with you to build the incredible organization and the mission driven companies that they're out there. It is needed if you want to get there, because it will break.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of team, what does your team look like today?
Yeah, so we have two offices ourselves. We have one office in Philly. We're based in Philly for the US. And then we have a second office in Lima, Peru, that is more operational forward. And we have agronomists across all the different countries that we work to support the regenerative pathway program to be able to transition farmers to regenerative organic certification in agriculture. And yeah, my team is, we have sales, marketing, ops, QA. The majority, I would say probably 40% of our organization is in operations and quality control, which is the brand promise that we have, if not a little bit more. And we're just really trying to build something, a brand that stands for authenticity and a brand promise of nutrient density.
That's a big team and such a great growth from when you launched. You launched in 2020, correct?
Mhm.
And so year six, to have such a growing team, to be in so many retailers, what is that feeling? And was this where you believed the brand was going to be 6 years in?
It's every milestone that we achieve. I need to do a better job to be able to celebrate and slow down because if myself in 2020 believed is what we're doing now, I'll certainly be very, very proud of the work that the team has been able to achieve. But I still believe that we're just getting started. We want to become a household brand. We want to be able to change the food system that prioritizes macros and food that actually feeds you and nourishes you, not the food experience that I had when I moved to the US. And we deserve that. America deserves that. And we deserve food that is better for you. And until we don't get there, we're not gonna stop. So there's certainly a long road ahead of us into how do we become a household brand and influence the food system at large. But we have built an incredible company so far with incredible customers and customers that really care and are really passionate. I just read a comment that someone was using our chia seeds and our beans as seeds in their farm this spring because they're such a clean ingredients and they're heirloom seeds and grains and they can use it for their gardens. And that just filled my heart. And we have gotten comments that consumers, maybe with some limited means, buy our products for special occasions, for anniversaries and birthdays, and because they want to create incredible meals for their loved ones. And how special to have a brand that is part of those moments to connect and slow down. So we certainly have achieved some really exciting things, but there's still a lot to be done.
There's still more growth. So after Whole Foods, just backing up there, when did you know that you were ready to go to the next retailer?
Yeah, I think what Whole Foods really allows it and really helps you, and they're just an incredible retailer, an incredible partner, is they allow you to test the product market fit and understand if your product is ready or product obviously needed new bags. And it also gives you distribution, which is key to be able to grow into retail. So it allows you to go into UNFI, mostly all nationwide. And that is your moment in order to grow the distribution and being able to grow with independents and other retailers in order to continue to drive velocity through those DCs. So you're not fully dependent on Whole Foods to be able to drive that pull through those DCs. So once you get into Whole Foods, once you go nationwide with Whole Foods, then you're open to really grow and grow with some of those co-ops or infra or NCGs and really take that distribution to where the products should be.
So was it UNFI that kind of introduces you then to other retailers once you're in the kind of their ecosystem?
Well, internally, we had to do that job of reaching out and pitching and putting sales decks materials together, send samples. But a big battle is to be able to have distribution. So once you have that distribution, if a retailer, if everyone wants to pick you up, it's a chain of 10 to 20 locations or maybe Jimbo's out in San Diego, you already are in that warehouse. So it's a
Yeah.
lot easier for them to say yes.
Got it. And then how do you, when you are pitching to those additional retailers, are you pitching your full assortment? Are you choosing specific items that you initially go into from a launch perspective with new retailers?
Yeah, the way that we tackle it now is we just focus on top performers. And because we want to be able to really drive performance, we want to drive velocity, we want to offer consumers the best products we have. It's maybe a little bit different than other CPG companies do it. And, you always want to maximize space and the square footage in the grocery store and the shelf that you're given. But for us, it's also really important to just really drive velocity
Right.
and grow thoughtfully. So we're going to offer the best products we have. And our hope is as we look at our whole portfolio is just optimized. If we have a product that is not connecting with the consumer of how we expected, because we have those relationships with farmers directly, we can change the supply at the ground. And we can be able to grow perhaps another crop that is familiar to that environment that has been grown there for a long time and introduce it through our channels.
That's great. I mean, being able to not just give your whole portfolio of an assortment, but being strategic in your top SKUs. Because once you do that and you see success, then, they're going to trust that your brand is a performer and they'll be more open to bringing in those additional SKUs that maybe, you want to test out versus knowing that they're your hero. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So what is next for Simply? What are kind of your visions and goals for the upcoming year ahead?
Yeah, right now we're working on a packaging revamp. We are looking at how can we just convey a cleaner, crispier message to our consumers on front of pack. Just learning a lot from consumers, doing testing, just working with the design team and seeing how we can just tweak it a bit to see how the message can about nutrient density can be cleaner and the value of Simply. So we're working on that now and we're very, very excited. And we are launching also in the next month in June our Pantry Club, which is a membership only club that will be available on our website and is a box that you get every quarter with incredible beans, grains, and one oil
That's
and just diverse the beans and grains that are only going to be available through the membership. A lot of our farmers have excess and unique grains and beans that, the volume might be too small and they're just not ready for retail, but they're beautiful and they're gorgeous and they're so fun and there's a story to be told and they're delicious. So we want to bring it in a more fun way and we're excited to launch Pantry Club in mid-June.
It's great. That's exciting. And it's amazing too. I don't want the story to be lost that you are helping, farmers all over the world that didn't initially have opportunity to actually probably be profitable at to the levels that they are now because they're being supported by you. So that's pretty amazing. Not just giving opportunity for customers that are shopping to give, more rich and dense food, but also supporting people and their families.
Yeah, it's a win-win for both. The farmer gets access to an export market for an incredible food that they're growing, and the consumer gets access to food that is not empty calories and it's just a better product for them and their families.
Yeah. Do you tell that story on package?
Not yet. So we're working on some iterations on how we can tell this story better.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that could definitely resonate more with consumers on shelf. So, thank you so much, Sorella, for just walking us through this amazing journey, this amazing growth of Simply. And I'm excited to continue to follow the growth of the brand. Do you let our listeners know where they can continue to support, follow, learn more, and most importantly, buy Simply?
Yes, of course. You can find us on our website is eatsimply.com with an I at the end, not a Y. And through social media channels is at Eat Simply, again with an I, not a Y. Follows our journey. We really like to promote regenerative organic agriculture, smallholder farmers, the work that they do, and we have fun while doing it. So hopefully you can also sign up for the waitlist for the Pantry Club and join once it launches.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Roberta.